Hello? Is this thing on? Oh, hello. Hello, hello, hello. Who do we have here so far, guys? Okay. I think there's just one person and um but I guess we can get started. So yeah. Oh, we've got two now. Yay, two. And then there were two. Um so yeah, I'm going to be talking about police corruption today. Um so that'll be fun, right? Um, so we're going to be talking about police corruption and how, and I want to talk about this in a nuanced kind of way, I guess, because um, I hear a lot of people, like even on the left, who aren't willing to go the full. Yay, it's working. Okay, so if you're just tuning in, hi Captain Crunk. If you're just tuning in, we're going to be going over police corruption and how it kind of connects to systemic racism and systemic systems of oppression against minorities. Um, and then we're also going to talk about it in kind of like a nuanced sort of way, because I feel like there are a lot of people still, even on the left, with like these sentiments of, well, not all cops are bad. Um, while that might be true, I do not and I will not ever say, you will never hear me saying that it's just a few bad apples, right? Because we know that it's way more than that. And I kind of use this metaphor in my other stream where it's like if you have one bad apple, just one, it's all it takes is one rotten apple, and you put it in a barrel of apples, something strange will begin to happen. Um, the entire barrel becomes rotten a bit quicker than it would if there weren't any rotten apples in the barrel. So I think that's a good way of illustrating um, against that point of like, oh, it's just a few bad apples. That there is systemic police corruption. Um, there's systemic racism in the institution itself. Um, Basically, from the very founding of that institution, it was founded on very racist Jim Crow um, type laws. So it was meant to keep minorities in line. Um, so it began at the very inception of these institutions. This isn't like, oh, we had noble intentions to begin with, and then, things became corrupted. No, 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 no. That's not how this went. And even like before the Ku Klux Klan and Jim Crow, they there was already a police force that was meant to protect colonialists and imperialists, white colonialists and imperialists in this country, against what they felt to be aggressive or primitive people. Like they viewed them as lesser. Um, and they were depicted in a way that was very violent, that you still kind of see today, like this false portrayal of minorities being more prone to violence, which is really not the truth. It's not the case at all. This has been a widely debunked myth, that that's the case, and yet this culture of systemic racism has kind of bolstered up a counter violence. And I'm not saying that that violence is justified or unjustified. Okay. I'm just submitting forth the facts of however you want to look at it. And I don't see how people on the other side of this can rationalize it any other way. Um, when you've oppressed people, they're going to push back. And when you oppress people in a violent way, they're going to push back violently as well. Um, this is just, a natural consequence of being violent towards anyone. Um, so when you have that type of back and forth, it creates a vicious cycle of hate. What do I mean by that? Well, you have the first you had in the beginning, these colonialists, these invaders that came in, and they they were a violent aggressor historically. We can trace it back to them being the initial aggressor. Um, and then as time went on, you have, people pushing back from that. And so that reinforces the aggressor's, mentality that, their hate is justified when it isn't. I don't believe in that. I don't personally feel that hate should ever be justified. Um, but when you have instances like this, it kind of is hard not to feel that way. It's hard to not want to push back. And like some people would say that, pushing back in that way in certain instances is justified. But in the long haul, um, it continues to perpetuate that violence and that systemic racism that we see in our culture throughout. So how do we prevent that from happening? How do we turn the tide, as it were, to ending systemic racism? Well, first and foremost, I think we need to be educated about these systems of oppression, where they came from, how they originated, and how they continue to be perpetuated. And we need to, not engage in ways in which it is perpetuated. Um, so, so yeah, um, like that's how I personally feel about it. I think that the only way we're going to grow and learn as a community is if we put a stop to the violence. And we put a stop to government power that is far overreaching. You see this with the police a lot, but you also see this with the military. You see this in all of the highest forms and levels of our government right now. And this isn't new. This is not a new thing. But it isn't a thing of the past either. It's not something that has ever gone away. And it's something that was there from the beginning of our founding, and the beginning of many foundings of many nations. So it's something that is globally problematic in our culture. This isn't just the United States. It's very easy to just like point the finger at a few bad apples, right? Or a few bad nations. And they keep moving the goalpost and pretending like this means that it doesn't mean it's a systemic issue. No, it's a systemic issue because it's so prevalent in our culture. I want people to recognize this. I want people to understand this and rationalize that how prevalent it is in our culture. It's been happening throughout history. It's gone on well into the modern age, and it's happening on a global scale. if that doesn't meet the criteria of systemic racism, I don't know what does, honestly. Um, so, as an anarchist, I feel that sometimes violent pushback is definitely necessary. Um, I would say that it greatly depends on the circumstances and the people involved. Um, but I do not think anybody should be above the law. And that includes people, men and women of law enforcement, and men and women of the military, and men and women in the highest levels of government. I do not believe anybody should have that type of power over the people. Um, yes, yes. It's all white colonized states. Yeah, every single state in the United States is a white colonized state, you could say. Um, but like it exists in other countries, and it exists in Canada. Like we were just talking about this earlier today. It probably happens and exists to some degree in places even like Norway and Sweden and Finland and all the very nice places that we often look at and go like, wow, they're so much better than us. But then when we look at it upon further examination, what we're seeing is we are seeing the same systematic institutions of oppression. And like, we cannot turn a blind eye to this anymore. We have to come together as a global community to end systemic racism once and for all. And that does involve things like defunding the police and defunding the military. So yeah. Questions, comments, engagements, suggestions, tips, criticisms on any of this? Am I making sense? I feel like, yeah, while my country was founded on a lot of that oppression, it was also founded on principles like we should, like, it was setting up in the direction of freedom and equality. And that has always kind of been there at the root. We might not have always understood what that should fully entail. And we've evolved, I think, globally over time, and things have improved over time, but that doesn't mean that the problem is over. It certainly isn't over. I don't think the quest for freedom is ever completely over. I think part of us as, human beings are always going to try to top ourselves. And we're always going to have flaws in some way. So there's always going to be something that we can improve upon, right? Thank you. And I feel like this is one of those things that we still, like, we've come so far, but we still have like light years to go on it. If that makes sense. Like, I feel like we need some serious federal policy reform. Like, we need policy reform on the federal level that safeguards minorities against systemic oppression. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean, I think it's high time we all take a big visit down to the Supreme Court and we demand that there be, additional amendments and protections put in place Similar to like amendments that we've had in the past that have like moved us forward in the direction of civil rights. We need more of that. We need more of that in ways of being able to safeguard against systemic oppression, though, because the way that the policies are worded, they're very loose language, and they can be misinterpreted, or exploited and downplayed, so that people can make excuses. And we shouldn't be making, be making excuses for this type of violence and, quite honestly, mass genocide anymore. We should all by now know better, but it's so difficult to try to wrap my head around how somebody can be of that mindset, that this is okay, this is fine, or that there's, or worse, that this is completely justified, or that this isn't happening at all. It very underlines the point of how little there is a conscious awareness of what's been going on for so long. People just like to pretend that it's either a thing of the past, or it's, basically just, variety of freedoms which have slowly expanded to reflect who or what those rights apply to. That's why things are phased in somewhat loose terms, leaving an open. Yeah, well, I mean, that can be exploited, though. Like, it has been. Like, people use it to either bolster up or undermine. Yeah. The way things can be openly interpreted can either make or break a law. And if it's a law that's supposed to be protecting the people, that is extremely dangerous. So, because they can abuse that power, or they can really use it to help people. And we want to ensure ways that it will definitely help people, rather than be abused to oppress people. Like, you see this with like things like the Patriot Act. It's hard to it's a catch-22. Like, it really is difficult. Right. And you can also say that, like, it can be abused, though, as well. So we want to be very careful about how we write federal policy, and the amendments that we should put forth should be very specific. I know that means more reading. Sorry, Congress. You can get off your lazy ass for once. No, for real. Like, people don't like passing laws and bills that they have to really read through. And this is why a lot of the language that in our laws is very open, and it can be manipulated. And especially ones pertaining to an overextension of government power, we should be wary of. We should just be wary of it. I'm not saying that the way in which the Emergencies Act was being used in Canada is wrong. But I would like to point out that that very act can be misused. It can be abused. It can be twisted and turned around depending on who the prime minister is, right? Just like the same with declaring martial law in the United States. It can be used to harm, or it can be used to prevent harm by combating a harmful protest, or a more violent protest, like what we saw, like these, white supremacists stormed the Capitol. Like that should not have happened. And unfortunately, like nobody was in a position of power at the time that this occurred that we could have declared martial law. People don't realize that. Like in order for somebody to declare it, and the only one who can declare martial law is the President of the United States. So if we're like right in the middle of an election, that opens up a lot of, potential possibility of harm. So it's like, do these very powerful laws even protect us in all instances? I would argue absolutely not. No, they don't. Can they? Sure. Now, whether you want to take the risk of having something like that in place in order to be able to use at your disposal or your benefit, I can kind of understand that to some degree. But at the end of the day, we should be either reforming these things to be written in policy in a way that's more safe. Like there needs to be fail safes in place, and there aren't any with a lot of these things. And I think that is very problematic. So we should be aware of that as well. Yeah. So, I mean, there's ways in which we can fix federal policy, but that is a separate conversation for another day. Whether or not you feel a certain way about that. I do believe that we should be taking action against protesters like the truckers in Canada or the Capitol riots. Like we absolutely should have something in place that should a fascist alt-right attack like this happen again, or if it's more violent next time, we will have something in our arsenal and we'll be able to use it. And this is a lot. This is a lot to take in because this shit is very heavy. It'd be nice if all government were dismantled, but I'm not going to engage with unrealistic expectations here either. Maybe one day. But no, we have to be able to protect minorities. And if it's your job to protect and serve, that should absolutely include minorities more so than they've been dealt with historically. Like they don't get the kind of help that, a white person would get in, circumstances that are dangerous just in a practical sense alone, practical settings alone. Like I saw this video the other day where these two college students got into some kind of fight or brawl, and one of them was white, and the white guy started it. You could clearly tell from the video he started it, and he was actually like winning, like he was beating the shit out of this kid. And the police sit the white kid down in a chair, and then they tackle the black kid to the floor. And so the black kid was the one who went away in handcuffs, and the white kid gets off with a warning. Like, yeah, they aren't, because of systemic racism. The cops aren't beating and gassing the truckers the way they did BLM because the cops are on their side. Exactly. And this is a huge indication of systemic racism. And like, you can even notice it in, like, with the example that I gave, which is like, even in a minor sense, it's there. Like, people are like you, it's easy to notice like the bigger, more larger, broader scales of it when it's happening, right? um but it's easier to ignore the minor instances of it occurring. Those are instances that are far more easy to write off, that a lot of common white people write off because they're not aware of the larger issue going on. But if they paid attention, like if they really paid attention to anything, to like to the news, or even just like going like basic human interactions with people. I mean, this girl caught it on her phone at her college campus, so it's like you can see this happening in real time when you go out the door. Like, you don't even have to turn on the news. Just pay attention. Like, if you pay attention, you'll see it. It's happening everywhere. And I encourage people who are on the fence about these issues to really pay attention, to really open your eyes and see where it's occurring in your culture. It doesn't matter where you're from, okay? Because this is a global thing. If you've ever seen an instance of this occurring, write it in the comments. I'd love to hear your guys' experiences of this. If you're, whatever minority or background you come from, whatever experiences you've had of witnessing systemic racism in your culture, I want you to put it in the comments. Tell me your stories, because this is important. Yeah. Comparative analysis of what happened here 2 years ago. The racial divisions are undeniably evident optically. Yeah. Like, exactly. Unless you're actively turning a blind eye to it, which sadly a lot of white people are. And they might not think of themselves as like racist overtly. Like, they might not see themselves as like, yeah, I intentionally hate minorities. But they are engaging in acts of oppression. They are engaging in acts of systemic racism without even realizing it. And then after the fact, they're like, yeah, that was pretty fucking racist of me. I shouldn't have done that. Or I shouldn't have thought that, or I shouldn't have, why didn't I see this? Like, it's a lot. And like, a lot of people are still waking up and coming to that realization, I realize. And people need to wake up to it, because it's not going to stop until we're all on the same side that this is wrong and we're not going to do this anymore. We're not going to engage in it. We're not going to turn a blind eye to it. We're not going to accept it. We're not going to tolerate it. We're not going to tolerate intolerance anymore. There we go. Yeah. I'm intolerant of the intolerant. I laugh, but it's true. You should be. I think everybody should be. I think we should all be like reanalyzing and paying attention more and listening to Black voices more, listening to Indigenous voices more, listening to all of the minorities' voices more. We need to wake up, pay attention, and hear their stories. Okay, Captain Chunks, nice seeing you again. Thanks for tuning in, man. So, I mean, there's a lot more that we can be going into on this, and I am going to wrap up here in a bit because I feel like right now I'm just reiterating my own perspective on it, but I am going to be deep diving into this a lot more. And I hope that, you know, this can help shed light on the broader systemic issues that we're facing. So, and I hope it encourages people to like really take a deeper, closer look at what's going on. Because, you know, there was a time when I wasn't always aware of this. And, you know, none of us are perfect and people can change. And I do feel like there are some people who will never change, and those people have to be dealt with. But there are people who are capable of learning and they are capable of changing their perspective on a very serious issue that's gripping basically the globe. So anyway, I'm gonna wrap up. Anyway, so next time we're gonna deep dive into this a lot, and hopefully I will have some, you know, people, you know, willing to either come on stream or tell me, you know, their stories, or if they want to just talk about it, or if they just want to address this one issue. And we can probably go into, you know, stuff more as time goes on. Thank you everybody for joining me tonight. I will be back on tomorrow. So yeah, I lost my train of thought. Like and subscribe, and don't forget to ring the bell so that you'll be notified when I'm going live again next time. And I think that's it. All right, guys. Natty out.